Very few people know how the logging industry works, the different types of companies within the industry, and who is the right type of company to sell your timber to. In this video, we're going to be looking at all the different types, the benefits, the negatives, and also my favorite way to sell timber at the end of this video that could save you thousands of dollars. Hi, I'm Madison Rawer. I've been in the industry for over 12 years, and my goal is to help educate you as a landowner on how to sell your timber the correct way and how to not be taken advantage of. So there are three basic types of companies within the industry. First off, you have your sawmills, and you have your logging companies, and you have the wholesalers, or in what we call as flippers. And let's dive into each one of these and dissect them a little bit and kind of explain which ones potentially are going to be a good fit for you depending on your scenario. So first off, we'll look at the sawmills, and the basic idea for them is, they are the end consumer of the logs. They're going to take the logs, mill them down into lumber, and then market the lumber. And typically speaking, they're able to get a little bit more out of their lumber because they have the end product, and thus are able to pay a little bit more for the timber standing. And you might think, well, that's it, that's who I need to sell my timber to. It's not quite that simple. A lot of these guys then get subcontractors out to do the work for them, and in this case that would be the loggers. And so they'll have their own buyers come out and buy the timber from you, and then have the loggers fulfill that work by doing the logging. Again, they often pay a little bit more, but they're also such a big operation that the sheer amount of volume that they move through their operation requires them to be as efficient as possible. Because of this, a lot of companies, they try to buy timber standing at the point of cut. What that is, you're cutting your tree at the very bottom where it flares out, and this allows for a lot more oversaw, a little bit overcut, and a lot of these guys don't like taking the time to mark timber. The reason that creates oversaw is when they're walking through, they're not measuring each individual tree. They are looking at entire property, and in some cases in 15 minutes looking at 50 acres and giving you a price on that. If somebody just walks in and looks at your property for a few minutes and says here's a price, it's probably not a good idea to sell to that company. They do not actually know how much timber is there in 15 minutes. They can, they might be close, but they will always estimate on the low end to keep themselves safe. That way they're not going to lose money. Next off, we have the loggers. Now, there's typically two different types of loggers. There is the type that you won't even really interact with much. They are simply the ones that subcontract to the mill, and that is all that they do. They only work for the mill. They don't buy their own timber, any of that. But then you also have the type that buy their own timber, and they would have, same as a mill, have their own buyers. They'll come out, and oftentimes these are a little bit smaller companies. And the good thing about these types of companies is oftentimes they can be a little bit more custom to your scenario. So they'll often, be a little bit more conservative on the timber they're taking. They'll take the time to mark the timber. These guys are, more apt to, hey, you want a road over here, they'll do a little bit of extra work for you, that type of thing. I do like working with loggers. The downside is because they are not the end consumer, oftentimes you're not going to get as much money out of these guys. Not saying that's always the case, but generally speaking. So then most of these guys will then take the logs back to a yard, or they'll have different buyers, and then market the logs to these mills. One of the better parts about a logger is you can sometimes do a percentage deal. And if you have somebody you trust, this allows you to see the total amount that the timber made and also get a percentage. That way if it ends up doing better than what they anticipated, then you get a cut of that. And that's oftentimes what I recommend to the guys. If you're not comfortable with that and would rather just want the money up front, that's fine. But I will say, most times from what I have seen, the loggers are not as able to pay as much as what your mill will. Last but not least, we got the wholesalers. Now, what do these guys bring to the table? Not much. Most of these guys, they'll brand themselves as a consultant, but really they're not really working for you. They are simply going out, and a lot of these guys will do a lot of driving, knocking on doors, sending out flyers. They're trying to buy timber, and they will just get the timber under contract and then simply go sell that contract. So, a few things, first off, they don't bring much to the table because, these guys are just in it for a quick buck. There are, again, you can't generalize and say everybody is like this, but a lot of them, they'll just try and buy as much timber on your property as possible. They'll cut it as hard as you let them, and they're not too concerned about the end product, and there's not a whole lot of service throughout the process. And on top of that, you don't know how much they're making. They may buy your timber for nickels on the dollar and then go sell it to full price, and it's honestly sickening sometimes what these guys will make on a single job, simply because the landowners didn't get multiple guys in to bid on that timber. And that brings me into a sort of fourth, not really, kind of version, and that is what I do myself. I'm a consulting forester, and there's a lot of guys out there like myself that do this, and this is generally speaking who I recommend working with. If you have connections in the industry, you have a mill, a logger, somebody that that does good work and you're not too concerned about it, 100% work with those guys directly. A consulting forester, though, can help you in this process, and they work for you. They're not working for the mill, they're not working for the logger or these wholesalers. They're working directly for you, and the compensation is clearly stated. You know what you're paying them. It's not the mill paying them, you are paying them directly for their service. Most of the time that's based off of a percentage, compensated off of the total timber sale. Anywhere from 8 to 10% is a pretty typical range. These guys then go in and they are managing the timber for you. And so we'll go in, mark the timber, and then because of all the connections we have, we'll often go and, you want to get at least 3, if you can, 6 to a dozen bids on your timber. This gives you a really good gauge of what your true timber value is. The interesting thing that I've seen is it's very rarely the same mill that wins the bid twice. So you'll have different mills that need different types of timber at different times. Because of this, at certain points of time, guys will pay more than other times. And it also seems to draw out a little bit of competition within these mills. The industry as a whole is a pretty close-knit industry. Everybody knows everybody, and there is a sense of competition that goes on when you're bidding on a nice piece of timber. These guys will put ridiculous money on this timber, and I've even seen them pay more than what they can even get out of the timber, because I know what these guys are getting for lumber and the actual end product, and there's no money to be made. Some of these guys simply just need the inventory, and rather than have their guys not working, they will pay more than what the timber's worth to be able to get that job. So, having a professional in the industry that has the connections can often pull more money out of the timber for you. There was a study done by OSU that found working with a consulting forester, usually you will take less trees and end up with more money in your pocket even after paying the consultant. There was one job that I did that the bids range from $46,000 all the way up to $106,000 on the exact same trees. So that goes to show you, if you got just one of those guys randomly, you could have been getting half of what your timber was worth in reality. So hopefully there was some value in this video for you guys. If you found this informative, just hit the like button, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you in the next one.